welcome back to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And we're starting off today with the question, what is the most memorable concert you've been to? Now, Joel, I know you go to a lot of concerts, so we'll have you start.
Oh my gosh, this is so hard, right? Because you have the curse of the recent, like the last show that you saw that you really loved. You're like, that was the best. And so I've been jogging my memory to some of my favorite moments. If you know me well, you know I'm a big fan of the Dave Matthews Band. I've been seeing them for 21 years now, and I've actually seen them 42 times in 21 years, and there's a lot of years off in that too. But I remember the very first time I saw them, my dad took me to go see them at Deer Creek Music Center. I don't know what it's actually called now, but it's Deer Creek forever. Yes. Mm-hmm. And it was like the most memorable experience, like seeing these guys live. It was amazing. I'm a huge U2 fan, and there's one concert back in 2011 I saw U2. I was on the field, because if you know me, if I go to a concert, I'm going to try to get as close as possible, right? I'm going to be in the music. And it started raining at the beginning of Where the Streets Have No Name, and it was like the heavens opened up, and I'll never forget it, you know? And so there's all these moments of the great shows, and then some really small club shows that I've seen too, that you're right in the music. It's so great. Mm-hmm. I love live music so much. I don't know what it says about me, but I love it so much. So it's hard for me to even pick one, but those are a couple of my favorites, probably.
Yeah. During the winter, Joel starts planning the summer concert tour series.
Yeah, it's like Joel has a tour to go see all these bands that he and his wife love, or maybe his wife just puts up with. And that's a lot of that too.
For certain, yes. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's not so much the actual concert, but this is really going to date me. So for these people that listen and don't actually know who I am, in 1990, yep, whoa, I know, the 1900s, you guys. The New Kids on the Block were touring, and it wasn't even so much the show, but I remember Karma Records, you used to have to line up outside because they had a lottery system. So
people don't even know what Karma Records is.
I know.
This is amazing. They're like all these things now.
I know.
We're going back.
So you stood out in the line. They gave everyone a number. Then they drew a number, and that's where they started in the line with selling tickets. So even if you were the first person in line, you may not be the first person to get the tickets.
Oh my gosh.
So my 9-year-old self and my parents loaded up, and I was in the back of this, Oldsmobile, laying down in a blanket because it was literally freezing as well, and to go stand in line to get tickets for New Kids on the Block. And we ended up buying 10 tickets. And by the time that we got, our number or whatever, all they had left were lawn seats. And so that was the last time my mom was like, I am never going in the lawn again. Yeah. But we took some of my friends, and it was a really great time.
10 tickets?
10 tickets to go see New Kids on the Block, 1990. Yes. So anyways, it was more the experience of getting the tickets. Really I'm sure the show was amazing, but my 9-year-old self doesn't also remember. Yes. Hello. Joey and the hair through the hat. Come on now.
Yeah.
10 out of 10. What about you?
So I went to Passion in 2019, 2020. And one of the most memorable things was right as we were ringing in the new year, they're singing, Hillsong is on the stage singing Good Grace, and the fireworks are going off.
Right, as sort of the ball would be dropping. I've seen videos of this moment. Yeah.
And it was so cool. I mean, I've been to other concerts that are really enjoyable, but having that where you're celebrating with thousands of other people as the new year's being rung in, that was really cool.
And was that awesome. At the Georgia Dome or the Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
Mercedes-Benz, yeah.
So it was in a football stadium.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah.
I have watched that on YouTube, but Abby was there.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think Hillsong is a great band. I didn't go there to see them. Yeah. There wasn't a specific band that I wanted to see, but just that moment in itself was just so cool.
Yeah, and that's Passion is more of a conference too.
Yeah,
There's a ton of music. That's awesome. That's
yeah. So that was really cool. Well, speaking of musical artists, we have an article here about Britney Spears.
Did nobody see Britney Spears live?
No. I would have loved
I've seen her 7 times, and I'm just kidding.
You're lie.
You wish.
Oops.
I would have loved that.
But Britney Spears says, I no longer believe in God. This is a Relevant magazine article. Britney Spears was in the news a lot last year as we waited for updates on whether or not her father's conservatorship would be terminated. It finally was in November of last year that a judge ruled that the conservatorship was no longer needed. Before this, the hashtag Free Britney was trending, with many people saying her father was controlling and abusive. Because of everything that happened, she recently was recorded saying that she doesn't believe in God anymore. She says, "God would not allow that to happen to me if God existed. I don't believe in God anymore because of the way my children and my family have treated me." So what do you say to someone who says if God was real, he wouldn't let bad things like this happen to someone like Britney Spears, who, she was innocent. There was no reason that her father should have been abusive.
She said, "I'm not so innocent."
Yeah, that's true.
In a song, but yeah.
Sorry. Cut you off. I think that's a really honest and human question that someone asks. And as a pastor, this is maybe the question underneath of the question I get most of the time. Like, this is a very common and human expression of the cognitive dissonance of who I thought God is loving, and then look at what's happening in my life. I mean, man, this is probably what I wrestle with the most. And so I would, if I was speaking to Mrs. Spears, I would just start by saying, thanks so much for your honesty in feeling this way. And me too, sometimes. Like, this is the hard rub of life. And I don't have a quick, quippy answer. I don't have the Twitter, hit back. And I would say anybody who does try to throw something quippy and something tweet-worthy at you about this massive problem is full of it. And we should not pay attention to them. This is a hard reality. So I would try to honor her in this, but I would say I think there are other ways to understand the pain that we experience, the problem of pain, if you will, and who I believe to be a loving God in Jesus. And I think life is much more full of tensions than it is to be like resolutions. And I think this is one of those tensions that we have to hold inside of this. So yes, I believe in a loving God revealed through Jesus of Nazareth. And I do believe that bad things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, bad things happen. So I would start there, ultimately. And then I have maybe a couple different approaches. Pastorally, I think about who I'm talking to about this kind of stuff. And so sometimes I can approach it more philosophically, to talk about I believe that God gave us free will. And because God gave me free will and you free will, I mess up my free will and I do selfish, hurtful things all the time. And maybe you do too. We do. She does. We all do, right? And because God gives us free will, we're going to make a mess out of things. But free will is really tied to the idea of love, too. I mean, think in your marriage to Nick. If it was programmed in his mind that he was going to love you and he had no choice to love you or not, would that be love?
Right. It's not true and authentic.
It's not true and authentic. It would be like we're robots. And God loves us so much that he gives us free will. So that we can choose him and we can choose to love other people, or we can mess things up and do things selfishly for ourselves. And because God is love, he gives us free will. And because we have free will, we're going to make a mess out of things. And so philosophically, those lines are really clear for me, that because this God is love, he allows us free will that hurts ourselves and hurts other people, and that stinks, but he's loving, and so he gives us that choice. So I might start there philosophically. The other way is more of an emotional appeal to me, that the God that we see revealed in Jesus is a God who does say, "Me too." There's a beautiful scene in the movie Selma about Martin Luther King Jr., where he is going to the hospital where there had just been an attack and there had been a young person die by the hands of a racist. And Martin Luther King Jr., the first thing he says to the family is that I want you to know that God was the first one to cry. God was the first one to feel pain through this. And I've always found that to be a really beautiful picture of the heart of God and what God is really like. And the God revealed to us in Jesus is a God who felt pain, who was betrayed, who mourned over the loss of his friend Lazarus and was not over it or above it, but was in the hurt and in the pain. And so I would just say, man, the God that I worship, the God that I follow, my Lord, my Rabbi Jesus, is one who's well acquainted with suffering and pain. And he's not just far off sending a lightning bolt there or being apathetic there. No, he's with us. And he's with me when I do struggle. And it means so much to me, into my heart and my emotions, knowing that this God is with me in the muck and in the mess and in the hurt. And he's well acquainted with sorrow. So I think there's two different ways. Like I think the love and free will approach is a little bit more philosophical. And it appeals to my heart. And this is what like moves me and gives me goosebumps to think about when terrible things happen, that like my Jesus understands and he's with me in it. Yeah. So I kind of think along those ways. I don't know where Britney would land there, but that's some of the ways that I would try to approach it with her.
Well, and I'm sure like just because her conservatorship is over doesn't mean that hurt and the pain and the betrayal that she has felt for decades like just goes away because all of a sudden, now you're kind of on your own. But, I guess part of the beauty in being part of like God's family is that it doesn't matter like how you perform or how many stadiums you sell out or how much money you make. So for me, like if those are the things that she's like turning against because she feels hurt and pain from her family that has, kind of looked at her and maybe in those ways, like I would feel like I would want to run to God because those are not things that he cares about as, your person. So I don't know. It's hard because, you look at God and, if you're a believer, I guess, if you're not, this is, a different conversation, but there's grace and there's understanding and there's acceptance for it, which I feel like she's been looking for, all these years, but hasn't actually got from her family. Like this is where it can be found. So the fact that she's kind of doing a 180 about face, for me, I want to be like, please turn the other way. Like you're running from something that's actually what you are probably looking for all these years.
Isn't that so natural though, that like the thing that we really need so often, we run away from when we need it the most, and I think like, it's like in my life, if I'm having a struggling season, I run away from community and people because I just feel like I want to be alone. But that's what I really need more than anything else are people to lean on and a community to belong to. There's this African proverb that says that a joy shared is a joy doubled and a sorrow shared is a sorrow halved. And I always think about that like, man, I just run the wrong place. I run to myself when I need to run to other people, and people if in a faith community, that's some of the power of church and of people that can be there with you in it. And the power of people to say me too as well, or like, you know what, that does suck, Brittany. Like what happened to you was an injustice, and we're going to sit here with you, and we're going to hold your hair, and we're going to watch Netflix, and we're going to do whatever is necessary. And I think that's some of the beauty that my faith brings me, and this faith that's not individualized and just personal and private, but it's communal. And so I would say like, man, run towards this.
I'm sure it's hard, obviously we're not celebrities. So, I can't imagine trying to find that community that is real and authentic.
Not an entourage.
Right, where you're constantly thinking like, what do they want from me? Are they friends with me because they, I have lots of money, or because I'm Britney Spears? You know what I mean? So I feel like that is probably a tension-filled point for her as well. But it's... Man, her life.
But Brittany, you are asking a really beautiful, tough question, and you are not alone. And I have wrestled with this question, still wrestle with this question. Many faithful followers of Jesus have wrestled with this question throughout the ages. You're in good company, and we just challenge you, I guess, and encourage you to turn towards this God who's with us in the mess.
Our next article today is a Latino Rebels article by Juan de Dios Sanchez Juardo. A Nicaraguan community unites behind Little League team in World Series. So Allison sent me this story.
I am in love with it.
Yeah, I love it so much. So for the first time in 50 years, Nicaragua's Little League team had the honor of representing Latin America in the 2022 Little League World Series held in Pennsylvania. 14 players from 10 to 14 years old got to be a part of the competition, but only one of their parents was allowed to accompany them on the trip. He was the only one that had a visa approved. When news got out that they would only have one adult in the stands providing support, members of the Nicaraguan community living nearby Pennsylvania showed up to fill the stands and cheer for the kids as substitutes for their absent family members. One man even flew all the way from Las Vegas to cheer on the team.
This is amazing.
I love this story so much.
And you're going to link the video, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because, you watch it and you think you have this whole little league team that's out there playing, and you have one lone parent. And, I'm sure that guy felt like the weight of all the responsibility to care for all of these kids. But like, the people that showed up and were cheering and supporting, like, people drove more than 6 hours, it said on the video too. And like Abby said, someone even flew from Las Vegas because he wanted to support these boys that were part of his community. You guys, so when I think about community, like, it's so much bigger than what we think, especially like, we think our little, like, maybe church community, or maybe you have a group of friends that you've run around with since high school, but you guys, it's so much bigger than all of that. These guys, they had no connection to any of these individual players at all, but the motivation that they provided for these kids on the field was like probably far outnumbered most of the other teams, just in like spirit and the soul that they felt. But yeah, I loved this story. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Got me right in the feels, as they say.
Yeah. So what lessons can we learn from those who showed up to support this little league team?
I think what I'm struck with in this story is just how representation matters, and how, they share this heritage and they share this, background that, no matter what, I'm going to be there. And because they see themselves in the players, and the players see themselves in the stands. And I think that connection that they have to the story of the people, even though they're all different, they work in all different kinds of different industries, and kids probably have different backgrounds and all these kind of things, but they're still connected to this deeper story, so much so that they would spend money and they would travel, and especially with gas prices what they were when this was going on too, right? I mean, this was an investment because it was a moment in history for their people. And I think I guess I lament a little bit that in this cultural moment in the West, in America, I can't think of like the same kind of parallel for American Western people right now. We're so splintered and so divided between red and blue, or urban or rural, or all the different dividing lines that we can come up with, to think like, okay, what is that shared story that you would travel for, to be there to support somebody you don't know their name, or you don't know anything like that. I mean, there's just so much power in showing up. And I think in a time when we can have so many excuses from showing up, and we can just push play, or we can stream, or I'll wait till the movie comes out so I can stream it, instead of going someplace to support something in the arts or in sports. There's power to just showing up and celebrating a shared story. I think this is part of the reason that the Olympics are powerful, right? When like, it doesn't matter what the last election said, but like, we're all cheering for that one ice skater, or that one toboggan guy, or curling. That's when we all care about curling, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's just something to it. And I think anytime that I see like a little glimpse of that unifying story, and that like people putting aside their differences to be a part of a bigger story, just to like a little glimpse of, this is how it could be, and maybe this is the way it should be. And so I think that's like, there's a part of me that's like I can ache, because I feel like we don't experience this kind of camaraderie and support and community and representation like we see in this. But I think that ache it's probably divine. It's probably because God is like, because you were created for this kind of thing, and we're just not experiencing it on this side of eternity, and especially in this cultural moment that we're in.
I mean, those kids will literally never forget that, probably as long as they live. Like, that stage is so huge anyways out in Williamsport that, I mean, they're meeting kids from all over the world, and then to have, something like that happen for them. I mean, they were waving their flag, and they made poster board signs that they were holding up and cheering. Like, it was pretty incredible. So
yeah,
I love that.
Well, what struck you about it, Abby?
I just love, it stuck out to me because the one father who got to go, he was a little bummed out and was worried that, the kids wouldn't do as well because of, not having as much support. And he felt, the pressure of being the support for these kids and stuff. And so he said that he felt like the kids went way further than they would have if they didn't have that support there. And so he just talked about how showing up can matter, and I love that part of the story.
For sure.
I love that too. And just that reality of like, we can go so much farther together than we could ever go alone, right? Like they played better. They played above their skill level because there was the support at their back. And like, I think that's a challenge for Jesus followers, for us to be like, okay, like where are we that support, for other people, for the next generation, for people that are down and out? Are we like the wind in their sails to push them beyond what they think they can do? Because that's some of the power of the human team that we get to be a part of. It's how we're designed. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't realize, I guess, how just showing up, makes such a difference, whether it's a cup of coffee or a meal or just, like you said, sitting on the couch watching Netflix or something together. Like, it's important. It matters. Yeah. So it was good.
Yeah. So on the subject of baseball, if you could magically be amazing at any sport, which one would you choose and why?
Does this have to be a real sport?
You said magical in the question, so I go to Quidditch immediately. If I could play Quidditch for Hogwarts.
Sure,
that's my thing. When you said magical in the way you wrote the question, I'm like, all I'm thinking about is Harry Potter right now.
Well, I was like, can Mario Kart be real? Because like, I don't really want to do race car driving. Like, I want to be able to like drop a turtle shell or a banana or something.
Peel.
Like, I don't.
But that Rainbow Road though, watch out for that Rainbow Road.
I fall off every single time. Literally, I hate it so much. But if I could like launch over cows and stuff like that, I would totally do that. If it had to be a real sport, I was going to say curling, and then you mentioned it, and I was like,
that's what I was going to say, too. And
I
was like, wow, that was rude.
Go. I know.
I threw curling under the bus.
Let's go, Italy 2028.
I've been looking at our analytics as a podcast, and like our curling fans, there's a big, and we just really dissed them.
Yeah,
I did today.
You did, not us. Abby and I, we're forming a curling team, 2028.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Curling, for real, for real?
Yes, big fan.
Are you guys even from Indiana? I mean, I know you're not, Abby, but
yes.
All I'm thinking about is basketball over here. Like, oh man, if I could just like play
I don't want to
basketball.
Run.
Yeah, but that's part of it. You're really good at it. You're not thinking about running.
Yeah. I'm not winded.
Incredible.
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean, I grew up in the 1900s watching basketball, 1990s watching the NBA Pacers duel with the Bulls and the New York Knicks. Like, oh man, I've watched all the 30 for 30s, and like I could place myself on the team with Reggie Miller, Rick Smits, Dale Davis, Antonio Davis, Mark Jackson. Oh man, that'd be so much fun.
Yeah.
But it wasn't in the cards. Even though I used to play basketball when I was like middle school and elementary age and stuff like that. And I'll just tell an embarrassing tidbit about myself. My very first AIM Instant Messenger screen name.
Oh, yes.
Why am I doing this? This wasn't even prompted.
No, this is free.
We're ready.
The road to humility is paved with being humbled and humiliated. Anyway, it was a smooth shot 33.
Nice.
It's my whole identity for a big part of my life. No, I think my number was 33 at the time, and that was it. So smooth shot 33.
I love that.
And I did not have a smooth shot.
I was, in fact,
but
not
if
smooth.
I could have been like Mike, man, that would have been something. But yeah, I think about playing basketball. If it wasn't Quidditch.
Oh. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, so curling was my first choice, but
goodness.
I think also gymnastics, just because I love watching them, flip around and do all that stuff. And I want to be able to do that without getting a headache or, falling on my
yourself,
butt.
That's amazing.
I know.
It feels
so
like
strong.
magic watching.
It really
gymnastics,
does.
'cause of how they just roll their bodies around. I always just think of
mesmerizing.
I think about the same thing if you ever been to like a NBA game and they're like doing like the thing where they're jumping off the trampolines and dunking.
Oh, yeah.
I always wonder like, how do you know you don't push too hard? Like, how do you learn that you're not going to go right into the backboard? I think about that with gymnastics.
Going into the backboard
how do you know
so
you're not going to
times.
fling right into the crowd? How do you like learn that? Oh, I overdid it. You know what I mean?
Oops.
Like, oops.
Yeah.
There's no oops. You just die. That's what happens. Or your leg just gets snapped off. But anyway,
gosh.
Terrible.
it's pretty magical.
It really is.
Yeah.
You do that in gymnastics.
So our final topic today is called suicide, an epidemic that hits close to home for many Americans. This is a Christianity Today article by Melissa Postel. A Lifeway research survey showed that 77% of Americans believe that suicide has become an epidemic in our country. According to the latest data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 45,979 people died by suicide in the United States in 2020, which amounts to one death every 11 minutes. Additionally, 12.2 million adults seriously thought about suicide in 2020. 38% of people surveyed believe that people who commit suicide are selfish, and 23% believe if you commit suicide, you're automatically going to hell. Scott McConnell, executive director of Lifeway Research, said Jesus taught that each person should love their neighbors as God loves each of us. Each person has value and purpose because they are loved by God and others. He continued saying, when each life matters individually and to the community, voluntarily removing any life is tragic. I love that quote that he has there at the end.
Yep.
But so why do you guys think that some people say you automatically go to hell for committing suicide? I've never seen anything like that in the Bible, but I have heard it before. So Joel, do you have any input on that?
I think that people say it because they would say, how could you truly love God and love others and like have a relationship with Jesus and end your life? I think that's why, because they would basically say
God
like,
is the giver of life.
well, yeah, and like, how could it be a legitimate faith if
Yeah.
you were in so much despair that you ended your life? You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think that's where it comes from, because you're right. There's no, I mean, the scriptures does not like have a passage on suicide. There are characters and people throughout the Old Testament that do commit suicide. We hear that Judas commits suicide, right? But there's not like an addendum right after that, and he went straight to the pits of hell. Like, we don't get that. It's sort of just part of the story and part of what happens in the human experience. So I think people, they try to tie 1 and 2 together in that regard, which just boils my blood a little bit of, I think, what it communicates to people and what it says to people that are deeply struggling with mental illness. I mean, I think this is something that comes up again and again in these conversations that we have. But mental illness is real. We all experience it to different degrees, and it is not a sin. It does not communicate to you or to anyone that you are spiritually deficient in any way, shape, or form. And I know, man, and just in my work, I communicate and have so many meetings with people that are just at the end of the rope. And you can say it's a selfish thing to do, and on some levels I understand that, but more often than not, it is people saying they just want to end the pain that they're in. They want the turmoil and the pain that they're experiencing to end, and they're not thinking beyond this pain. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever met somebody or known somebody who actually has physical chronic pain to where like every day it is this pain that they cannot get away. Like, I can't imagine what that's like. I'm the biggest baby. If I have a headache, if I have a headache once or twice, like every couple months, I feel like I just need to lay down and it's just a little headache. But to always, every waking hour of your life be in pain and having trouble sleeping, like, I can understand wanting to end that physical pain. And therefore, I understand why people would want to end this mental turmoil that they're experiencing too. I can understand why they want to do that. So I don't see it as a selfish thing. More of I just see it as a tragedy, and I see it as something that people of faith, we need to talk about more, and stop doing the fear mongering about heaven and hell attached to everything too. Like, it just, for Pete's sake, it's not doing anybody any good. And it just breaks my heart when I, hear about the numbers and the real open seats at tables that people experience in their homes because of suicide. And I just wish that we would stop trivializing it, and we need to start destigmatizing the emotions and the mental health crisis that lead people to make this decision. And that's really where my heart is at. And all I can say, scripturally about this is like, we're challenged. Paul challenges us in multiple places, but in Romans 12, verse 15, it says, "Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep." And I think that Jesus people, we would be making better inroads and be making a better impact if we were there to actually weep with those who are weeping, instead of trying to diagnose and say, like, well, now they're in hell, or if you do this, you're going to hell. Like, come on, like, let's just be there to like weep with them. A little bit like what we were talking about earlier about, the power of community and just sitting with somebody in their hurt. But suicide is not the unforgivable sin. I mean, it's not like there's this passage that really hits on it. It's a tragedy, and I would hope that nobody would ever do it. But is God's love beyond? Isn't that sort of the power of God's love and God's grace? Is it that it overpowers sin, and it overpowers our stupid decisions that we might make, in the micro and the macro? And God's grace and his invitation for me to be a part of his kingdom wasn't determined by my aptitude or how well I scored on the don't sin list. You know, right? Like, we weren't invited to the table because we were so good. We're all invited to the table because we can't, and we have need, and God's calling us back to understand our goodness from the beginning of the story. And so, it frustrates me. I hope that this is a generational shift. I don't hear it as much around people in my generation, but I'm hoping we can tell a different story when it comes to suicide and hopefully prevent more of these things happening.
Well, and that there was another line in the article that said Americans are twice as likely to see suicide as an epidemic to be stopped rather than a sin they can judge. And I was like, oh, good. That gives me a little,
that's trending in the right direction.
That's trending in the right direction.
Yes.
Like, that was
I don't think that was the case with my parents' generation, probably.
No, I don't think
it was
so either.
more like, oh, it's a sin, our depraved generation, they're killing themselves. And to see it more as an epidemic of mental health that we need to push against, man, that's an encouraging thing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. But no verses in the Bible. You're just not going to find them. Right. And if you do, you're ripping it way out of context and trying to write your own story with it. But you know what's clear in the pages of the scripture from Genesis to Maps is God's unending love and patience and grace, and his invitation to us while we're weak and weary and while we want to just cry and curl up in a ball when we're at the end of our rope. Oh, the invitation is to come rest and find peace and to be a part of a family, a community that can lift you up when you fall and sometimes help you not fall in the first place. And so, like we've done multiple times whenever we talk about mental health, if you're listening and, man, you've got suicidal ideation, you're in a deep pit of depression and despair, man, reach out to us at the church, email us at the podcast. We'd love to connect you with a mental health professional, and we would love to support you in any way that you can, because it can get better, and you are so loved and so valuable, and you are not spiritually deficient. You just need help, and I need help, and we all need help, and it just might look a little different, but we're here for you, and God is for you no matter what.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for any updates at atypicaltalkpod. And make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.